The evening air was growing chilly as Priya walked home from her shift at the downtown animal hospital. Street lamps were just starting to flicker on, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. She pulled her blue sweater tighter around her shoulders, quickening her pace. After a long day of helping sick animals, all she wanted was a warm cup of tea and her favorite TV show. That's when she heard it, cruel laughter echoing from the alley between Ming's grocery and an old warehouse. The sound made her stop in her tracks. There was something about that laughter that sent a chill down her spine, something that told her this wasn't just kids playing around. "Do it again. Look how it tries to run." A young voice called out, followed by more laughter and a heart-wrenching whimper. Priya's heart began to race. After 8 years working at the animal hospital, she knew the sound of an animal in pain. Without thinking twice, she turned toward the alley, her work shoes scuffing against the pavement as she hurried forward. The scene that greeted her made her blood run cold. 3 boys, probably around 11 or 12 years old, had formed a circle around something small and golden-colored. One boy wore a red baseball cap turned backward, another had on a school soccer jersey, and the third was in a plain white t-shirt despite the cool weather. They were taking turns kicking at whatever was trapped between them, their faces lit up with a mix of excitement and something else. Was it fear? That's when she saw it clearly, a small puppy, no more than a few months old, cowering against a rusty dumpster. Its golden fur was matted and dirty, and around its neck was what looked like a piece of rough twine, cruelly tight against its skin. The puppy tried to stand on shaking legs only to collapse again, letting out another pitiful whimper. "Hey!" Priya's voice came out louder than she expected, echoing off the alley walls. "Stop that right now." The boys froze like statues, their eyes going wide as they realized they'd been caught. The one in the soccer jersey whispered something to his friends, and in an instant they scattered like leaves in the wind, their footsteps pounding against the pavement as they ran. But one of them, the boy in the white t-shirt, hesitated for just a moment. His eyes met Priya's, and in that brief second, she saw something that surprised her, not defiance or anger, but worry. She recognized him then. It was Raj, the quiet kid who lived in the apartment building next to the animal shelter. She'd often seen his mother, Mrs. Kumar, coming to the shelter, asking about affordable pet care options. As Raj disappeared around the corner, Priya turned her attention to the trembling puppy. Moving slowly so as not to frighten it further, she crouched down, speaking in soft, gentle tones. "Hey there, little one. It's okay. You're safe now. I'm not going to hurt you." The puppy pressed itself harder against the dumpster, but something about its movement seemed off. It wasn't just fear. There was confusion in the way it moved, as if it couldn't quite tell where it was or where the voice was coming from. Priya reached into her bag and pulled out a small bag of treats she always carried for nervous animals at the clinic. The rustle of the bag made the puppy's ears perk up, but its eyes. Priya's heart sank as she got a closer look. The puppy's eyes were clouded over, a pale bluish-white that told her immediately why it hadn't run away from its tormentors. This little one couldn't see. It was completely blind. She carefully tossed a treat near the puppy, letting it catch the scent. After a moment's hesitation, its nose began working overtime, sniffing the air until it found the small morsel. As it ate, Priya noticed other things that made her medical training kick in, the way its ribs showed through its dirty fur, how its back legs seemed to shake even when it wasn't moving, the raw skin around its neck where the twine had rubbed it raw. "What happened to you, sweetheart?" she whispered, mostly to herself. "Where did you come from?" The sound of approaching footsteps made her tense, ready to protect the puppy if the boys had returned. But the figure that appeared at the entrance to the alley wasn't one of the children. It was Mrs. Kumar, her face flushed as if she'd been running. "Oh, thank goodness," Mrs. Kumar said, breathing heavily. "Raj just came home crying. He told me what they were doing." She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes as she saw the puppy. "I had no idea. I'm so sorry." Priya stood slowly, keeping one eye on the puppy who was now cautiously sniffing around for more treats. "Mrs. Kumar, do you know anything about this puppy? Where it came from?" The older woman nodded, wringing her hands. "It belonged to Mr. Singh in 4B. He passed away last week. Heart attack. The puppy must have gotten out somehow. The boys found it wandering near the dumpsters this morning." Pieces of the puzzle started falling into place in Priya's mind. Mr. Singh, she remembered him now. A kind, elderly man who would sometimes wave to her from his balcony when she walked to work. She'd never known he had a pet. Raj didn't tell me right away, Mrs. Kumar continued, her voice shaking. He said they were trying to help it. They heard some adults talking about how a blind puppy would probably be put down at the shelter. They thought if they could make it tougher. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The revelation hit Priya like a punch to the gut. The boys hadn't been acting out of pure cruelty. They'd been trying to help in their own misguided, horrible way. They'd heard adults talking about the harsh realities of pet shelters and disabled animals, and their young minds had twisted that information into something dark. I understand they thought they were helping, Priya said gently, but what they did was very wrong. This puppy is already struggling with being blind and losing its owner. It needs kindness and proper care, not, she gestured to the alley, unable to find the right words. Mrs. Kumar nodded vigorously. Of course. I'll talk to Raj. He's a good boy, really. He doesn't always understand things the right way. The puppy had finished its treat and was now sitting quietly, its head tilted as it listened to their voices. Despite everything it had been through, there was something undeniably sweet about its face, a gentleness that hadn't been beaten out of it. First things first, Priya said, reaching for her phone. This little one needs medical attention. I'm going to call the clinic and let them know I'm bringing in an emergency case. Would you and Raj like to come with us? It might help him understand better how to really help animals in need. Mrs. Kumar agreed immediately, already pulling out her phone to call her son. As they waited, Priya managed to get close enough to the puppy to slip off the cruel twine collar, replacing it with a spare leash from her bag. The puppy, sensing perhaps that it was finally safe, leaned ever so slightly against her leg. Looking down at the small creature, Priya felt a mix of sadness and hope. This was just the beginning of the story, she knew. There would be hard decisions ahead, medical challenges to face. But for now, at least, this little soul was safe. And maybe, just maybe, this terrible incident could become a teaching moment, a way to show these kids the right way to treat animals, especially those who needed extra help and care. As she waited for Mrs. Kumar to return with Raj, Priya gently stroked the puppy's matted fur, making quiet promises that things would get better. The sun had fully set now, and her dreams of tea and television were long forgotten. Sometimes, she thought, the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, in dark alleys with scared puppies and misguided children who need to learn a better way. The walk to the animal hospital seemed longer than usual, each step measured and careful to avoid jostling the injured puppy. Mrs. Kumar had returned with Raj, who couldn't meet Priya's eyes. His shoulders were hunched, and occasional sniffles broke the evening quiet. The puppy was cradled in Priya's arms, wrapped in her sweater, its small body trembling less now that it felt secure. Dr. Patel will be waiting for us, Priya said softly, trying to break the heavy silence. He's the best vet I know, especially with special needs animals. She glanced down at Raj, who was walking slightly behind his mother. Would you like to know how we help animals at the clinic? Raj nodded slightly, still not looking up. His mother gave him a gentle nudge forward. Go on, Beta. Listen to what Priya Diddy has to say. Well, Priya began, adjusting her hold on the puppy as they waited for a traffic light. The first thing we always do is try to understand what an animal is feeling. Just like people, every animal is different. Some are scared, some are hurting, and some, like this little one, need extra help because they can't see. The puppy's nose twitched at a passing breeze, and its ears perked up at the sound of a distant car horn. Despite its blindness, it was clearly taking in the world in its own way. Reg finally looked up, watching the puppy's reactions with growing curiosity. But how can it live if it can't see? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Wouldn't it just bump into everything and get hurt? That's a good question, Priya replied, grateful for his interest. Dogs actually don't rely on their eyes as much as we do. Their nose and ears tell them so much about the world. With proper care and training, blind dogs can live happy, full lives. They learn to map out their surroundings using their other senses. They turned the corner, and the familiar blue and white sign of the downtown animal hospital came into view. Through the windows, they could see Dr. Patel already preparing an examination room. The lights inside seemed warm and welcoming after the dim street. "Listen," Priya said, stopping just before they reached the door. "I know you boys thought you were helping. Sometimes adults say things that are hard to understand about animals being put down or not having a chance. But hurting an animal never makes it stronger. It only teaches them to be afraid." Rage's eyes welled up with fresh tears. "We didn't want it to die," he blurted out. "Uncle next door said blind dogs get, you know. We thought if it learned to fight back." Mrs. Kumar placed a comforting hand on her son's shoulder as Priya shook her head. "The world can seem very harsh sometimes, but there are always people working to make it better. That's what we do here at the clinic. We help animals that others might give up on. Would you like to see how?" The boy nodded eagerly this time, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. As they entered the clinic, the familiar antiseptic smell mixed with the gentle whir of medical equipment greeted them. Dr. Patel, a kind-faced man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, looked up from his preparations. "Ah, there's our patient," he said warmly, gesturing to the examination table. "And who are these helpers you've brought with you?" As Priya made the introductions, she carefully placed the puppy on the padded table. The little one tensed at first, but relaxed slightly when Priya kept a gentle hand on its back. Dr. Patel approached slowly, speaking in soothing tones as he began his examination. "Now, Raj," Dr. Patel said, "would you like to be my special assistant? You can help me make our friend here feel safe while I check for injuries." Raj's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded, stepping closer to the table. Dr. Patel showed him where to place his hand on the puppy's shoulder, explaining how gentle pressure could help an animal feel secure during an examination. As the doctor worked, he explained everything he was doing, turning the examination into a lesson about compassionate animal care. He showed them how the puppy's blindness was likely present from birth, pointing out the clouded eyes and explaining how some dogs are born with genetic conditions that affect their sight. "But look at how well developed his other senses are," Dr. Patel demonstrated, making a soft clicking sound that caused the puppy's ears to swivel precisely toward the noise. "Nature has an amazing way of compensating. When one sense is diminished, others become stronger." The examination continued, revealing the extent of the puppy's condition. Besides the blindness and the obvious injuries from the alley incident, there were signs of malnourishment and mild dehydration, but most concerning was a heart murmur that Dr. Patel detected. "The good news," he said, straightening up, "is that most of these issues are treatable. The bad news is that this little one will need specialized care, particularly for the heart condition. It won't be an easy road." Raj, who had remained by the table throughout the examination, looked up with determination in his eyes. Can we help? Me and my friends? We want to make it right." Dr. Patel and Priya exchanged glances. "Actually," Priya said slowly, "there might be a way. We have a program here at the clinic where young people can learn about caring for animals. Would you be interested in that?" The transformation in Raj's face was immediate. Hope replacing guilt, excitement replacing shame. "Really? Even after what we did?" "Especially after what you did," Dr. Patel said firmly. "The best way to make up for a mistake is to learn from it and do better. Plus, this little fellow is going to need lots of friends who understand his special needs." Mrs. Kumar, who had been quietly watching the entire time, stepped forward. "Perhaps this could be arranged for all the boys involved. It might help them understand." "Of course," Priya agreed. "We can start with basic animal care lessons, and as they learn more, they can help with the rehabilitation process. Every animal teaches us something new about compassion." As if on cue, the puppy let out a small yawn, its pink tongue curling as it settled more comfortably on the table. Despite everything it had been through, there was a resilience in its spirit that touched everyone in the room. This wasn't just about saving one puppy anymore, it was about teaching young hearts the true meaning of strength and kindness. The initial crisis had passed, but Priya knew this was just the beginning of a longer journey. There would be challenges ahead, medical decisions to make, resources to arrange, and young minds to guide. But looking at Raj's transformed expression and the peaceful puppy on the table, she knew it would be worth every step. As Dr. Patel began preparing medications and paperwork, Priya couldn't help but reflect on how life's darkest moments sometimes lead to unexpected light. What had started as a terrible act of misguided children was transforming into an opportunity for growth, learning, and healing, not just for the puppy, but for everyone involved. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity at the downtown animal hospital. The little blind puppy, who they started calling Lucky, had his own special corner in the recovery ward. His golden fur had been gently cleaned and brushed, revealing a healthier shine underneath all the dirt and tangles. The cruel twine that had hurt his neck was replaced with soft bandages, and though the wounds were still healing, his tail would give a gentle wag whenever he heard familiar voices. Dr. Patel's examination had revealed more about Lucky's condition than they initially thought. Besides his blindness and the heart murmur, there were signs that he hadn't been eating properly for quite some time. His previous owner, though well-meaning, had probably struggled to provide proper care in his final days. The vet team worked out a special feeding schedule with small, frequent meals to help him regain his strength without overwhelming his system. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about what had happened in the alley. Instead of anger and blame, something unexpected happened. People started showing up at the clinic, first just a few, then more and more. An elderly lady brought a soft blanket she'd knitted. The grocery store owner from down the street dropped off some premium puppy food. Even the local school principal came by, wanting to discuss how they could turn this incident into a learning opportunity for all their students. But the most remarkable change was in the three boys. Rage had told his friends about the volunteer program at the clinic, and though they were scared and ashamed at first, they all came forward. Under Pryor's guidance, they started learning the basics of animal care. It began with simple tasks, helping to keep Lucky's space clean, learning how to approach animals gently, understanding why certain behaviors frighten pets. "See how his ears move when he hears us," Pryor explained one afternoon as the boys sat quietly observing Lucky. "That's how he creates a picture of his world. Every sound helps him understand where things are." The boy in the red baseball cap, whose name was Dev, leaned forward with interest. "So he's not really helpless at all, is he? He just does things differently." "Exactly," Pryor smiled. "And watch this." She took out a small bell attached to a rubber ball. When she rolled it across the floor, Lucky's ears perked up and he followed the sound perfectly, his nodes working over time to track the toy's movement. The third boy, Arian, who had been the quietest since everything happened, spoke up. Can we make him more toys like that? With sounds and stuff?" That simple question sparked a whole new project. The boys started gathering safe materials to create sensory toys for Lucky. They learned about different textures, sounds, and scents that could help him play and explore his environment safely. More importantly, they began to understand that being different didn't mean being weak. Dr. Patel watched their progress with growing approval. "You know," he said to Pryor one evening as they were finishing up their rounds, "sometimes the best medicine isn't in our supplies at all. It's in the changes we see in people's hearts." The clinic started receiving calls from other veterinary practices and animal shelters. Lucky's story had touched something in people, and suddenly everyone wanted to know more about caring for animals with special needs. The boys, proud of their new knowledge, helped create information packets about their experience, complete with pictures of the toys they'd made and tips they'd learned. But there was still one major challenge ahead. Lucky's heart condition would require ongoing medication and monitoring. The costs would be significant, and while many people had donated to help with his immediate care, finding him a permanent home that could handle his special needs seemed daunting. That's when Mrs. Kumar surprised everyone. During one of the boys' volunteer sessions, she pulled Pryor aside. "We've been talking at home," she said, watching as Rage gently guided Lucky through an obstacle course they'd created with cushions and sound markers. "Our apartment building recently changed its pet policy. And seeing how much Rage has grown through this." Pryor felt her heart skip a beat. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Mrs. Kumar nodded, her eyes misty. "We want to adopt Lucky. Rage has already promised to put his pocket money toward the medications, and more importantly, he understands now. He really understands what it means to care for someone who needs extra help." The news spread through the clinic like wildfire. The staff, who had all grown attached to Lucky, were overjoyed. But no one was happier than the three boys who had started this journey in such a different way. They helped prepare a special space in Rage's home, using everything they'd learned about making an environment safe for a blind dog. The day Lucky went home with the Kumas, there wasn't a dry eye in the clinic. The little puppy who had faced such cruelty had not only survived, but had helped transform 3 young lives. Dev and Aryan became regular visitors, helping Raj with Lucky's care and continuing their volunteer work at the clinic. But perhaps the most beautiful part was watching Lucky himself. Despite everything he'd been through, he showed no fear of children. Instead, his tail would wag enthusiastically whenever he heard young voices, as if he somehow understood that his story had helped them learn a better way. You know what's amazing? Raj said one day as they watched Lucky confidently navigate his new home, following the sound markers they'd placed around different rooms. We thought we had to make him tough to survive. But he was already tough, just in his own way. He taught us that being strong doesn't mean hurting others. Sometimes it means being gentle and patient instead. The local newspaper ran a small story about Lucky and the boys, focusing on how a moment of cruelty had transformed into a lesson about compassion. But for those who had witnessed the entire journey, no article could capture the full depth of the change they'd seen in the boys, in the community, and in themselves. As Prina watched Lucky settling into his new life, surrounded by love and understanding, she realized that sometimes the most powerful changes come from the most unexpected situations. A blind puppy had helped 3 young boys see the world in a completely new way, and in doing so, had shown an entire community the true meaning of resilience and compassion. As autumn leaves started falling in the neighborhood, Lucky's story was creating ripples nobody could have predicted. The Downtown Animal Hospital's youth volunteer program, which had started with just 3 guilt-ridden boys, had grown into something remarkable. 15 kids now showed up regularly, eager to learn about caring for animals with special needs. The change in Raj, Dev, and Aryan was astounding. From being the boys who once heard a helpless puppy, they had become the program's most dedicated young teachers. They took special pride in showing new volunteers how to understand animals that were different. Remember, Raj would tell the newcomers, holding up one of the sensory toys they'd made for Lucky, just because an animal can't do things the same way we do, doesn't mean they can't do them at all. They just need a chance to show us their way. Lucky had settled beautifully into his new home with the Kumar family. Their apartment had become a masterpiece of adaptive design for a blind dog. The boys had placed textured mats in different rooms so Lucky could feel where he was walking. Wind chimes hung at key doorways, their gentle tinkling helping him navigate. Even the water bowl had a small fountain feature that made a quiet bubbling sound, helping him find it easily. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman visited the clinic, holding a carrier with a 3-legged kitten inside. She had seen the newspaper article about Lucky and had driven 2 hours to reach them. The kitten had been born with only 3 legs, and other clinics had suggested putting it down. I just couldn't do it, she explained, tears in her eyes. After reading about Lucky, I thought maybe there was another way. Dr. Patel examined the kitten while the 3 boys watched intently. The little cat was otherwise healthy, just missing its front right leg. Rage's face lit up with an idea. You know what, he said, looking at his friends. Lucky taught us that being different isn't bad. It just means you need to find new ways to do things. Maybe we could help this kitten too. That's how the Different But Perfect program was born. The boys, with help from their expanding group of young volunteers, started adapting their sensory toy designs for other animals with special needs. They worked with Dr. Patel and Priya to understand different disabilities and how to help animals adapt. The 3-legged kitten, who they named Tripod, became their second success story. The boys designed a special climbing structure with ramps instead of steep jumps, proving that a cat could still play and climb naturally, just with some thoughtful adjustments to their environment. Word spread quickly through social media. Soon, the clinic was receiving calls from people all over the region who had disabled pets or had found animals with special needs. Each case brought new challenges and new opportunities to learn. Dev, who had once been the loudest in encouraging the others to kick Lucky, now spent hours researching and designing adaptive pet equipment. He even convinced his father, who worked with computers, to help them create a website where they could share their ideas and success stories. It's funny, Dev said one day, while helping to update their website. We thought being tough meant being cruel, but the real tough ones are these animals. They never give up, they just find their own way to be happy. The program's impact reached beyond just helping animals. Parents noticed their children becoming more understanding of human disabilities too. The school principal reported that bullying incidents had decreased significantly since many of the students got involved with the program. One particular moment stood out. A new family moved into the apartment building, and their daughter used a wheelchair. Instead of the awkward stares or avoidance that might have happened before, the local kids immediately welcomed her, having learned from their animal friends that different abilities didn't mean less valuable. Lucky, meanwhile, had become something of a neighborhood celebrity. Every morning, Mrs. Kumar would take him for his walk, and people would stop to watch in amazement as the blind dog confidently navigated the sidewalks, responding to subtle sound cues that the boys had helped train him to recognize. His heart condition required regular medication, but the entire community pitched in to help with the costs. The local pharmacy even started a special fund for pets with ongoing medical needs, inspired by how the neighborhood had come together for Lucky. Arian, who had been the quietest of the three boys, found his voice through teaching younger kids about animal care. "You see," he would explain, demonstrating how to approach a nervous animal. "They're just like us. They want to feel safe and loved. Sometimes they're scared because they've been hurt before, but that doesn't mean they can't learn to trust again." The clinic's waiting room walls were now covered with before and after photos of their success stories. Lucky's picture held the central spot, and beneath it was a simple message: different abilities, same hearts. The boys had chosen these words carefully, wanting to capture everything they'd learned from their journey. Dr. Patel often found himself sharing Lucky's story with other veterinarians who visited the clinic. "It's not just about the animals," he would say, watching the young volunteers work with their special needs pets. "It's about helping children understand that compassion is stronger than cruelty, that differences can be gifts, and that sometimes our biggest mistakes can lead to our most important lessons." As winter approached, the program prepared for a special celebration. It had been 6 months since that fateful evening in the alley, and they wanted to mark how far they'd come. They organized an open house at the clinic, inviting everyone who had been part of their journey. Lucky attended as the guest of honor, proudly wearing a new vest that identified him as a therapy dog in training. The boys had discovered that his gentle nature and resilience made him perfect for visiting schools and hospitals, sharing his story, and bringing comfort to others who faced challenges. What had started with an act of cruelty had blossomed into a movement of kindness that kept growing. The three boys who had once thought strength meant causing pain now understood that real strength lies in helping others overcome their challenges. "You know what's the best part?" Rage asked during the celebration, scratching Lucky behind his ears just the way he liked. "We thought we were going to teach other kids about helping animals, but really, Lucky and all our special friends, they're the ones teaching us. Every day, they show us that there's no such thing as helpless. There are just different ways of being strong." Winter brought new challenges and triumphs for the different but perfect program. The first snowfall of the season created an interesting situation for Lucky and his friends at the downtown animal hospital. The blind puppy, now growing into a handsome young dog, experienced snow for the first time, and his reaction taught everyone something new about resilience. Mrs. Kumar brought Lucky to the clinic one snowy morning, laughing as she described his first steps into the white powder. "He was so confused at first," she said, brushing melting snowflakes from her coat. "The world suddenly sounded different, everything muffled and strange. But you know what? Within minutes, he was playing in it like he'd known snow his whole life." Ranj and his friends had gathered at the clinic for their regular volunteer session, and they watched in amazement as Lucky demonstrated his newest skill, tracking sound through the snow. The soft crunch under his paws seemed to give him even more information about his surroundings than usual. "It's like he has super hearing," Dev observed, tossing a jingling ball that Lucky caught perfectly despite the snow's interference. "He's actually better at finding his toys in the snow than some of the other dogs who can see." The success with Lucky had inspired the clinic to take on more challenging cases. Their newest resident was a deaf cat they called Whisper, found shivering behind a dumpster during the first cold snap. Most shelters would have considered her unadoptable. Not only was she deaf, but she was also already 7 years old. But the boys had learned their lesson well. They immediately began adapting their teaching techniques, working with Dr. Patel to develop a system of hand signals and vibrations to communicate with Whisper. Arian, especially, showed a talent for understanding her needs. "She can't hear us coming," he explained to a group of new volunteers, "so we had to figure out other ways to let her know we're around. Watch this." He demonstrated how they'd installed small pressure pads around Whisper's favorite spots that would create gentle vibrations when someone approached, preventing her from being startled. The local elementary school took notice of their work. The principal invited the boys to give a presentation about their program during the Winter Science Fair. What could have been a simple show and tell turned into something much more meaningful when they learned that a new student who was hard of hearing would be joining the school after winter break. "We can use what we learned from Whisper," Raj exclaimed during their planning meeting. "If a deaf cat can learn to feel safe and happy, we can help make sure this new student feels welcome too." The boys worked harder than they'd ever worked on their schoolwork, preparing their presentation. They created videos showing how animals with different abilities adapted and thrived. Lucky came as their special guest, demonstrating how his other senses had grown stronger to compensate for his blindness. But the most powerful moment came when Arian shared their original story, how they had once been the ones causing pain, and how Lucky had helped them learn a better way. The audience fell silent as he spoke, his voice clear and confident. "We thought we were teaching these animals," he said, "but really they're teaching us. Every day, they show us that being different isn't wrong, it's just different. And sometimes, different is exactly what the world needs." The presentation had an unexpected effect. Other schools began requesting similar talks. The boys found themselves becoming young advocates for both animal welfare and human understanding. Their message was simple but powerful. Every living being deserves a chance to show what they can do in their own way. The program's success attracted attention from unexpected places. A local tech company offered to help develop better adaptive equipment for disabled pets. They worked with Dev, who had shown a knack for design, to create more sophisticated sensory toys and tools. One of their best innovations came from watching Lucky navigate through snow. They developed a special collar that used varying vibrations to help blind dogs understand their environment better. The prototype was tested on Lucky, and his already impressive navigation skills improved even more. But perhaps the most meaningful development was how the community itself had changed. The same neighborhood where Lucky had once been kicked and hurt had become a safe haven for animals with special needs. People no longer saw disabled pets as burdens, they saw them as opportunities to learn and grow. Mrs. Kumar's apartment building, once hesitant about allowing pets, now had a special program for residents who wanted to adopt animals with disabilities. The building manager worked with the clinic to ensure proper accommodations were made for each animal's specific needs. The Winter Science Fair project grew into a regular part of the school curriculum. Students learned about empathy and problem-solving through working with the clinic's special needs animals. Teachers reported that incidents of bullying had dropped significantly as children began to understand and appreciate differences among themselves. One cold afternoon, as snow fell softly outside the clinic windows, Dr. Patel gathered everyone for an announcement. The Different But Perfect program had been nominated for a Regional Community Service Award. But more importantly, their model was being adopted by other clinics and schools across the state. "You see," he said, looking particularly at Raj, Dev, and Arian, "sometimes the worst moments in our lives can lead us to our greatest purpose. 6 months ago, you boys thought you were teaching a blind puppy to be tough. Instead, that puppy taught you. And now you're teaching others what real strength looks like." Lucky, who had been dozing in his favorite spot by the reception desk, lifted his head at the sound of applause. His tail wagged gently, and those who knew him best swore they could see a smile on his face. He might not have been able to see the impact he had on his community, but he could surely feel the love that surrounded him. As everyone celebrated the news, Priya watched the 3 boys who had started it all. They were no longer the confused kids who thought cruelty meant strength. They had become young leaders, showing their community that kindness and understanding could change not just one life, but countless lives. The snow continued to fall outside, adding another layer of quiet beauty to the winter evening. Inside the clinic, surrounded by success stories both furry and human, the warmth of compassion and understanding kept everyone cozy. It was proof that even in the coldest times, the warmth of kindness could create the most beautiful transformations. Spring arrived with a burst of new energy at the downtown animal hospital. The Different But Perfect program was flourishing beyond anyone's wildest dreams. What had started with 3 boys and 1 blind puppy had grown into a movement that was changing lives, both animal and human. One sunny morning, Priya arrived at the clinic to find a small crowd gathered outside. A news crew from the local television station was setting up their equipment while Dr. Patel spoke with a reporter. The Regional Community Service Award had brought unexpected attention to their work. "It's not just about helping animals," Dr. Patel explained to the reporter. "It's about helping people understand that differences don't define us, they make us unique." Lucky sat calmly by his side, his golden fur gleaming in the morning sun, a perfect example of what the doctor was saying. Inside the clinic, Raj, Dev, and Aryan were preparing for something special. They had been working for weeks on a new project, a guidebook for other clinics and shelters who wanted to start similar programs. But this wasn't just any guidebook. It was filled with their personal experiences, honest reflections, and practical advice drawn from their journey. "Should we include the part about, how it all started?" Dev asked hesitantly, looking at a blank page in their draft. The boys had always been honest about their past mistake, but seeing it in print felt different. Reg nodded firmly. "We have to. That's the most important part. People need to know that anyone can change if they learn to understand instead of fear what's different." The boys had grown so much since that fateful evening in the alley. Dev, once quick to act without thinking, had become patient and thoughtful. He spent hours designing new toys and tools for their special needs animals, carefully considering each animal's unique abilities. Aryan, who had been so quiet and withdrawn, now confidently led tours for school groups visiting the clinic. He had a special way of helping nervous children understand that disabilities didn't make animals, or people, any less worthy of love and respect. And Raj, well, he had discovered a talent for training therapy animals. Lucky was his first success story. The blind dog now visited hospitals and nursing homes regularly, bringing comfort to people facing their own challenges. Together, they showed that sometimes the best helpers are those who understand struggle firsthand. The news crew filmed as the boys demonstrated their work with various animals. There was Whisper, the deaf cat, who had not only adapted to life at the clinic, but had become a mother figure to other rescue cats. The boys showed how they used light signals and vibrations to communicate with her. Then there was Boulder, a 3-legged German shepherd who had recently joined their program. The boys had worked with a local carpenter to design special ramps and supports that helped Boulder move around as easily as any other dog. They demonstrated how they'd learned to adapt their training methods for each animal's specific needs. The best part, Aryan explained to the reporter, is watching them realize they can do things their own way. It's like they just need someone to believe in them, and then they show us what they're capable of. The camera captured a beautiful moment when Lucky, sensing a nervous child in the waiting room, gently approached and laid his head on the child's lap. The little one, who had been crying moments before, broke into a smile and began gently petting the dog. "See that?" Priya said softly to the reporter. "Lucky can't see that child's face, but he can feel their anxiety. These animals teach us that there are many ways to understand and help each other. Sometimes not being able to see means you can see more clearly with your heart." The boys' guidebook was nearly complete. They had included everything they'd learned: how to assess an animal's unique needs, how to design adaptive equipment, how to train volunteers, and most importantly, how to change people's perceptions about disabilities. "But you know what the real secret is?" Raj said during his interview. "It's not about fixing anything. These animals don't need to be fixed. They just need people to understand that different isn't broken. Once you understand that, everything else becomes easier." The news story aired the following week, and the response was overwhelming. Clinics and shelters from across the country began reaching out, wanting to learn more about their program. Schools requested copies of their guidebook. Parents of children with disabilities shared how the program had helped their kids feel more accepted and understood. One evening, as they were cleaning up after a busy day, Dr. Patel gathered everyone in the clinic's break room. "I want to tell you something," he said, looking at each of the boys in turn. "When you first came here, after what happened with Lucky, I wasn't sure what to expect. But you've shown us all something incredible, that the capacity for change and growth exists in everyone if they're given the chance." The boys exchanged glances, remembering how far they'd come. Lucky, who had been dozing nearby, got up and walked perfectly between them, his tail gently wagging. He didn't need eyes to know he was among friends who had learned to see with their hearts. That evening, as the sun set behind the city buildings, casting long shadows through the clinic windows, Priya watched the boys heading home. They were talking animatedly about their plans for the program's future, new ideas for helping animals, new ways to spread their message of understanding and acceptance. She thought about how a moment of cruelty had transformed into a movement of kindness, how 3 boys who once thought strength meant causing pain now understood that true strength lies in helping others find their way. The clinic had become more than just a place for healing animals. It had become a place where both humans and animals learned to see past their differences and find their own kind of perfect. As Lucky trotted happily beside Raj, his paws confident on the familiar sidewalk, his golden fur caught the last rays of sunlight. He was living proof that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the darkest moments, and that with understanding and compassion, everyone can find their place in the world. 1 year had passed since that life-changing evening in the alley. The downtown animal hospital was hosting a special anniversary celebration for the Different But Perfect program. The clinic's walls, once plain and clinical, now displayed colorful photos of success stories, each one telling a tale of transformation. Lucky, now a certified therapy dog, stood proudly at the entrance with Raj and his family, greeting visitors with his gentle presence. Though he couldn't see the crowd gathering, his tail wagged steadily as he recognized familiar voices and footsteps. He had grown into a beautiful adult dog, his golden fur gleaming and healthy, no trace remaining of the scared, injured puppy he once was. Inside, Dev and Ariane were showing visitors around their newest addition to the clinic, the Adaptive Solutions Workshop. This special room, funded by their Community Service Award, was filled with custom-made equipment and toys designed specifically for animals with different abilities. Local craftspeople had joined their cause, volunteering their skills to create whatever the animals needed. This ramp system, Dev explained to a group of visiting veterinarians, we designed it after watching Boulder, our 3-legged shepherd. See how the surface changes texture at different points. That helps animals feel secure as they climb, even if they can't see or have mobility challenges. The program had grown beyond their wildest dreams. What started with 3 boys trying to make amends had become a model for clinics across the country. Their guidebook, now professionally published, had helped establish similar programs in over 50 cities. Dr. Patel stood at the clinic's entrance, watching the celebration unfold. "You know," he said to Priya, who was arranging refreshments nearby, "when those boys first brought Lucky in, I never imagined we'd end up here. They've changed more lives than they'll ever know." The celebration brought together all kinds of people whose lives had been touched by the program. There was the little girl who had arrived in her wheelchair a year ago, now volunteering regularly with her service dog. The elderly man who had adopted Whisper, the deaf cat, saying she had given him a reason to smile again after losing his wife. Even some of the craftspeople who helped create their adaptive equipment had stories about how the program had changed their perspective on disability. But perhaps the most touching moment came when Raj, Dev, and Ariane took the small stage they had set up in the clinic's waiting room. The 3 boys, now confident young advocates for animal welfare, had prepared a special presentation. "A year ago," Raj began, his voice clear and strong, "we stood in an alley making the worst mistake of our lives. We thought we knew what strength meant. We thought we were helping by trying to make a blind puppy tougher." He paused, looking down at Lucky, who sat calmly by his side. "But Lucky taught us that real strength isn't about being tough," Dev continued. "It's about finding your own way to live, to love, and to help others. Every animal we've worked with has shown us that being different isn't a weakness, it's just a different kind of perfect." Ariane stepped forward, holding up their original handwritten notes from their first days of volunteering. "We want to thank everyone who gave us a chance to learn from our mistake. Dr. Patel, who taught us about compassion. Priya, who showed us how to understand animals' needs. And especially Lucky, who forgave us and showed us a better way. The room erupted in applause, but the boys weren't finished. They unveiled their newest initiative, a scholarship program for veterinary students interested in working with special needs animals. The money they had raised through their guidebook sales and community donations would help train the next generation of caring professionals. As the celebration continued, visitors moved from station to station, learning about different aspects of the program. At one corner, they demonstrated their latest adaptive toys. In another, they showed videos of their therapy animals working in hospitals and schools. Every station told the story of transformation, not just of the animals, but of the people who helped them. Lucky made his rounds through the crowd, doing what he did best, showing everyone that disabilities don't define who you are. Children who were initially nervous about approaching a blind dog soon found themselves laughing as he played with them, following their voices and movements perfectly. Near the end of the celebration, Mrs. Kumar shared something that brought tears to many eyes. "You know," she said, addressing the gathered crowd, "when Raj first told me what happened in that alley, I was heartbroken. Not just for the puppy, but for my son. I'm worried about what kind of person he might become. But now?" She looked at her son with pride. "Now I see that sometimes our worst moments can lead us to our best selves." The boys had one final surprise for everyone. They unveiled a new sign for the clinic's entrance, a beautiful plaque that read, "Every heart has its own rhythm, every soul its own light. Welcome to a place where differences are celebrated and every being is perfect in their own way." As the sun began to set on their celebration, casting warm golden light through the clinic's windows, Dr. Patel gathered everyone for a final word. "Today we celebrate not just the success of a program," he said, "but the power of transformation. These boys showed us that it's never too late to learn, to change, and to make a difference. And these animals," he gestured to Lucky and all the other special needs animals who had found their place at the clinic, "they prove every day that limitations only exist in our minds." The celebration ended with a beautiful moment. Lucky, the puppy who had once been a victim of cruelty, now led a group of therapy animals in a demonstration of their work. Each animal had their own challenge, their own difference, but together they showed that every being has something special to offer the world. As people began to leave, carrying with them new understanding and hope, Prina watched the three boys sitting quietly with Lucky. They had grown so much, learned so much, and taught so much to others. Their journey from that dark alley to this moment of light was more than just a story of redemption. It was proof that when we open our hearts to understanding, amazing transformations are possible. The story of Lucky and the three boys would continue to inspire others, showing that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin in the moments we least expect, and that true strength lies not in causing pain, but in helping others find their way to shine.